Hi, I'm going to talk about microcredentials and digital badges in this brief presentation. The focus of it is to define microcredentials and then to offer a proposal to DADAC for the use of microcredentials in both the upcoming Quality Assurance and Accreditation Conference, but also as a kind of a long-term measure to promote professional development among quality assurance professionals and perhaps even to generate a little bit of revenue for DADAC. So let me start with my definition. And I'll begin by saying that microcredentials are not what we are accustomed to in our typical higher education systems, and that is that a typical course or a typical program you would sign up for, and all students who are in that program would essentially take the same courses, and they would come out the other end of the program looking like each other. They would also have a transcript, and at the end of each semester, they get grades for the courses that they took over that 14-week or 15-week period. And that grade is just a grade. It doesn't tell you what exactly was in that class, what was learned in that class. So that's the more traditional approach, which is considered to be more linear, more inflexible, and probably more importantly is institution-centered. It's more prescriptive from the perspective of the institution. In contrast to that, you have micro-credentials, which are considerably more learner-driven and employer-driven, meaning that the pathway that the learner gets to take is based on what the learner perceives are the needs of or her or his needs for employment, either future employment or current employment. And it's employer driven because the employers get to identify what are the outcomes of the micro credentials. They're the ones who need the people with the skills, and they know what skills are needed, and therefore they can identify specifically what those skills are. Another important thing about micro credentials is that they are competency based, and that leads to deeper learning. So as opposed to studying theory and concepts and at the end of the semester or in the middle of the semester regurgitating that theory or those concepts, the learner in a micro-credential generally has to demonstrate that they have not only understood the material, but they can apply the material as well in a real-life situation. And this leads to a little bit of deeper learning in terms of understanding and application. The other important point of micro-credentials is that in contrast to the traditional 14-week class, they're shorter in duration. They essentially are 1/3 of a credit, which means that a full credit is about 36 hours, so a micro-credential is about 12 hours, and that leads to actually probably about 1 or 2 contact hours and then maybe 10 hours of work that the student would be expected to do in terms of readings, maybe some writing, and actually implementing or applying something that would lead to that competency-based function of the micro-credential. So what happens traditionally is that the material is delivered, again, online through a website, and then the students will be given an assignment where they may have to design and develop a project. They would have to apply that project, and then they'd have to actually analyze it and then report back on what they did. And that's the competency-based part. So they would actually have to perform something and show you that they performed something. The deeper learning comes from the analysis and the reflection piece of this as well. So they are generally asked not only what did you do, but what did you think about it and what did you learn going through that process. So that makes the micro-credential, although it is very short in nature, it is it's arguably much more beneficial because it makes the students really think about what they've done. And it makes them do something, actually, not just regurgitate on an exam. So what it may look like is that you have a student or an employee in an organization or pre-service, and they might take a particular credential, which goes about 2 weeks, and then they take another credential on another topic, and they follow this pathway until they have enough credentials to reach their goal. Now, these various credentials might be coming from the same organization, such as DEDAC or a particular university or some other association, professional or association that is providing these, or they might be taking them in different locations and just gathering them as they go along the way. But the main point is that instead of having a set number of courses that are prescribed by the university in a traditional program, these students, along with the advice and the guidance from the employers, get to choose their own pathways and take different micro-credentials to get them where they need to be, whether that goal is graduation, but in most cases the goal is actually better skills, higher skills, making them more competitive for the employment opportunities. So what I'm proposing to DEDAC for the Quality Assurance and Accreditation Conference and beyond that is that we develop some micro-credentials that are competency-based and that do lead to deeper learning. So in the conference, we are going to have a day of speakers who are going to be speaking from a higher level, if you will, broader topics, maybe trends, maybe more data at a higher level, maybe in regional levels or national levels. But in day 2 of the conference, there are going to be more workshops, more hands-on practical applications that the participants will become involved in. So what the participants could do is sign up for a micro-credential, and then they could take the information that they get generally from day 1 and specifically from day 2, and from there they could design and develop and apply a particular short-term project. Then again, they could analyze it, they could report on it, they could reflect on it, and then they could provide the evidence of all of these. And they would submit that to DEDAC, and DEDAC being, it could be a committee of DEDAC members, or it could be just me if I'm the only one who wants to take this on. But I would be willing to, or this group would be willing to evaluate these materials, evaluate this evidence, and provide a micro-credential to the participant who submits these materials. So what it may look like is something like this. You can have degrees of micro-credentials. So if you just do a day 1 micro-credential, for instance, you could have analysis and reflection, and at the end of the day 1, they submit just a reflection, and we would give them a so-called active participant badge or micro-credential. If they take that over into day 2, and they actually design and develop an activity that they would use in their own workspace based on something that they learned in day 2 or day 1 at the conference, then we could give them something, again, I'm just making up these names, but like a quality assurance professional practitioner. And then if they take it beyond that and actually implement and analyze and reflect upon what they have done, then we could give them a quality assurance expert badge. So these are different degrees that you could be providing depending on how deep the participant wants to go in the activity. So the process, as I see it, would be that we would first identify what these specific micro-credentials are. The participants would enroll in the micro-credentials either before the conference or at the conference. They would participate in the conference. They would do one of these activities that I've just discussed, and then they would submit their evidence. It'd be evaluated, and then they would be awarded a micro-credential or a badge, either outright or with some adjustments. So you may be familiar with badges because these 3 icons that I've got on this page represent various badges. And what the badging mechanisms do is that for current or future employers, these badges are available on a person's LinkedIn site, perhaps on a Facebook site, or on a website someplace. And the idea is that when someone clicks on that badge, it opens a page that reveals these various aspects of the micro-credential. So I'm sorry, I got to go back to here. So how they designed and developed it, how they applied it, and the evidence that they actually applied it or implemented it, and then finally their analysis and reflection. So as opposed to